what he said in the keynote address to this meeting was, quote, "An internationally famous, highly influential author on environmentalism told me religion must die. It is the fundamental cause of virtually all social, economic, and ecological problems and much of the violence in the world." Religion must die, is what he was told. He also reflected that another highly placed environmental author said to him, "You know, Mr. Barney, you've done a lot of good with your life, but think of all the good you could have done if you had been spared the pernicious influence of Christianity." I might also add that in 1993, when I attended the UN's Population Control Summit in Cairo, Egypt, the director of the Agency for International Development, J. Brian Atwood, said that religions will interpret their beliefs differently as a result of the discussions going on in Cairo. They will, and of course the implicit addendum to that is or else. Or else what? Or else perhaps what we saw in Katanga. Or else perhaps what we've seen elsewhere from the French Revolution through communist China. Or else perhaps what we saw in Waco. Now, does anybody remember what Bill Clinton said in the immediate aftermath of the Waco Holocaust? Appropriately enough, he said it on April 20th, which is the anniversary of the birth of Adolf Hitler. What he said was, "I hope that people who are tempted to join cults will be deterred by the horrible sights they have seen." There is, unfortunately, a rise in this sort of fanaticism all over the world, and we may have to confront it again. Bill Clinton is a man who has a congenital aversion to clarity of speech. He is a man whose every pronouncement is carefully weighed and measured and scrutinized and qualified and festooned with caveats, escape hatches, and loopholes. He speaks fluent loophole. He speaks as if from his infancy he had been suckled on the writings of the most inventive lawyers you can imagine. He is the type of a person who makes F. Lee Bailey and the other dissimulators in the O.J. Simpson defense team look like paragons of clarity of speech. Okay? What, therefore, can we assume regarding this unadorned declaration that Bill Clinton and his administration would be willing to do Waco again if necessary to deal with the threat of fanaticism? I think that is a profoundly sobering thing that was said. And to make matters even worse, a couple of days after he had said this, after he had declared his willingness to conduct another atrocity like this, another episode of violent and murderous religious intolerance, Bill Clinton had the temerity to go to the opening and the dedication of the Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C., in which he uttered his prefabricated and high viscosity pieties about the need to understand our common humanity. What is the motto of the Holocaust Memorial Museum? Never again. Bill Clinton just a couple of days ago had said we may have to do this again. This is sobering stuff, and we should bear this in mind whenever, for instance, we see Bill Clinton at a podium, at a church, at a pulpit at a church, where he's frequently seen whenever his agenda is running into trouble, he will take to a church. Quite shameless, actually. It reminds me of that line from The Merchant of Venice about how the devil can cite Scripture to his own purpose. That's essentially what happens. And for some reason, there are a lot of people who are willing to give him the benefit of the doubt on that account. For the same reason, I would say that they're willing to give the United Nations the benefit of the doubt. And these are parts of the same equation. You have to have the ultimate threat of force against those of us who do not bow the knee to the state as God. Let's talk now about the assault on the family. I just recently attended the UN's World Summit on Social Development in Copenhagen. They created a document there that Secretary General Boutros Ghali refers to as a new social contract for humanity. Social contract, incidentally, was the name of the philosophy that we saw in the French Revolution. The new social contract. Social contract means that you take the individual wills and you harmonize them with the general will, and the state represents the general will. It is a collectivist idea. And the Copenhagen Summit dealt with redistribution of wealth. It dealt with the use of so-called education programs to redesign families throughout the world, including the United States. And it also dealt with the idea of bringing about a new religious vision meant to fortify their utopian dream of a one-world socialist order. And I've got literally pounds and pounds of documentation to buttress this assessment of what happened there. Now, what they did in creating this document was they referred on 63 separate occasions in the document to family or families, but they never defined the family. And the reason why they didn't define the family is because the UN says the family cannot be defined, either explicitly or implicitly, because the family definition is evolving. Now, one of the people that you're finding in the constellation of elites who are helping to herald the redefinition of the family is the current Speaker of the House of Representatives, Newt Gingrich. He affixed his name and a foreword of his composition to this book, Creating a New Civilization, by Alvin and Heidi Toffler. Alvin and Heidi Toffler are what is known as futurists. In other words, they are people who have privileged insight into what the future is bringing, and because of their superior insight, they can tell us how we should order our new lives. In this book, they say that we're seeing social upheaval and creative restructuring in our society. We're in a third wave of society. These great impersonal waves of history come and destroy all that is before them. And among the tokens of this social upheaval and creative restructuring, they say, is the emergence of new family styles, specifically new non-nuclear families. This is something we see in the UN's literature. In their Guide to the International Year of the Family, as a matter of fact, they said that we're seeing the evolution of new family types, including cohabitation, including same-gender relationships, same-gender so-called marriages. We're seeing the development of communal family orders. They go so far as to talk about the idea of a family consisting of a child and an adult responsible for that child's upbringing. This is a family. And the Swedish delegation to Copenhagen, which wrote the definition which the UN uses for the family, defines as a family any social configuration you find under one roof. A married couple, a cohabitating couple, a same-sex couple, a commune, conceivably an individual with pets and plants. Any variety of social configuration you find under one roof is qualified as a family under the definition that the UN endorsed in Copenhagen with the support of the Clinton administration's delegation. Let's talk about the pedigree of the assault on the family. These things have not emerged spontaneously, like waves arising out of a tranquil sea. Waves are the result of tectonic shifts on the ocean floor. Over there, the result of gravitational relationships between the Earth and the Moon and the Sun and so forth. In other words, these things don't arise spontaneously. And below the surface of history, there have been movements of centuries' duration which have sought to bring about the changes that the United Nations is now prepared to inflict upon us, upon our country, our society, and our families. And they go all the way back to Plato. Plato said the ideal state would be one in which no child knew his parents and no parent knew his children. So the children could be raised communally by the state and molded and shaped and crafted and sculpted into whatever the state decided they should be. And he had a three-tiered system in which these children would eventually become one of these hierarchical tiers of society. They would be governed by their position in life, and it would be determined at a very early age what they would be, and they would be nothing else. That was Plato's idea. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who was the chief theoretician of the French Revolution, a guy from Switzerland who had a vision in which he saw 1,000 sparkling lights. He saw 1,000 points of light, and suddenly it was revealed to him that man was by nature good and that only our institutions had made him bad, said that the first institution we have to change is the family. Why do we have to start with the family? Well, because the family is the basic unit of human society. It was ordained by God to provide a social order. That's the American view, as represented in the writings of all the Founding Fathers and the writings of John Locke, who was the most influential writer, apart from the authors of the Bible, as far as the Founding Fathers were concerned. Now, Rousseau said, Plato's idea is the way we should go. We should have a system in which the children are the property of the state, and we should have laws which would govern the way that parents are raising their kids within the home. Or better yet, we should take them out of the home and raise them communally. Now, why would Rousseau say such a silly and stupid thing? Well, a couple of reasons. First of all, because he was a socialist, and socialists are, of course, in the business of saying and writing silly and stupid things. Secondly, Jean-Jacques Rousseau was a man who did not have a family of his own. He had 5 children, 5 illegitimate children, and he deposited them in an orphanage. And then he turned around and wrote a book on childcare.